something to keep pace on this. Sorry?
Should we start?
Yes, please.
Oh. So, yeah, I prepared a small presentation, and by no means I'm an expert in autonomous car. That's a huge area. I'm just delving my hands in it. I mean, there are probably folks from the autonomous industry here. I don't want to point out anybody in particular, but yeah. So, autonomous cars have been in the news lately a lot, primarily because of two very high-profile accidents. And it'll be interesting to see what NTSB comes up with, what was the major cause of these two accidents. Why autonomous cars have actually become so hyped up right now? I think a few things probably happened. So, to give you a history of autonomous cars, a lot of people may be familiar with it. It actually started in around 2007-8 timeframe when DARPA actually had two competitions. One was for autonomous cars in pretty much outdoors, without any road network. The second one is DARPA's Urban Challenge. So the first, the outdoor challenge was actually won by, I think, Stanford's team. The urban challenge was won by the CMU team. And that actually is the origin of a lot of these startups and other companies you see in the around Valley nowadays. So considering that happened 10 years ago and how much less developed the whole space of hardware and software were at that point in time, the AI was nowhere in the scene at that point in time. Deep learning was not there. And they did a remarkable job of actually running a car at 30 miles an hour through city streets. Google essentially approached some of those folks who had built the CMU autonomous car called BOSS, and that became the origin of Google's autonomous car program, and which now we know as Waymo. And so, as you can imagine, in 10 years, lots have changed. And unfortunately, what Google has done, or some other companies like Cruise or Uber or Lyft has done, none of those informations are actually public. So we don't really know how much progress has been made in the last 10 years. But considering the amount of publicity we're seeing, they probably have significant amount of development in that period. So, so let's try to understand the car industry a little bit so that we know what kind of problems the autonomous cars are actually going to have. So this is the world car market. So can anybody guess how big is that market?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Can anybody guess how big is the car market, the worldwide car market?
It's right there. Year? How many are in? How many exist, or how many are sold each year?
Sold each year.
I'm gonna say 100 million.
100 million is the number. So if you total up all the revenues, that becomes about a $2 trillion market. That includes the commercial vehicles, consumer vehicles, everything else. So, and then there is obviously, as you pointed out, there's the aftermarket, which is about 10 times of what's being sold right now. So there's a billion cars in that. So, so the aftermarket, as this slide points out, is about close to 650 billion. So if autonomous cars actually comes into the consumer's hand gradually, that means all these aftermarket cars would actually have to adapt somehow, meaning all this, that there is potential to actually sell something to this space. So that's a huge market. Yeah. So that should give you an idea about the extent of the auto market. This is huge. And also to build, so the whole infrastructure of actually building an automobile is also huge. As you can see, there is a whole supply chain, And you'll hear a couple of words very often called Tier 1 and Tier 2, and the OEM. OEMs are basically the car makers, like GM or Ford or Toyota. And Tier 1 and Tier 2 are not really that well known, but these are also huge companies like Continental, Magna, Bosch is probably the largest one. And then there are Tier 2s. Tier 2s are probably would be more familiar to folks here, basically because these are the suppliers who provide the silicon and the software. Freescale, NXP, NVIDIA, Broadcom, all those are pretty common name around here. So, and then obviously it goes to the, so there are basically two channels in there. One is it goes to your distributor, basically your car seller, the folks you buy cars from, and that's one channel. And the other channel is essentially the part suppliers, aftermarkets and stuff like that. So that actually goes to another channel. So this is a huge infrastructure. So if you want to do something in this space, you actually have to have some amount of knowledge of this. So how complex is a car? So this is a very simplified picture actually of the Model X. So as you can see, there are a whole slew of these suppliers providing different components of the car. And a typical car contains about 40,000 parts. Again, the 40,000 parts is probably a smaller number if you actually consider this, some of these parts can be fairly big by themselves. So it's probably significantly larger than that. And to build something like this is not simple. So, and you need a lot of money. And as you can see, Tesla, it's not a large car company, and they burn a lot of money. So they burn about, I think about $1 billion a quarter. So what is actually driving the automotive industry to change at this point of time? As I see, there are basically these 5 components to it. I'll come to autonomy later on. But I think the more significant changes that are happening in autonomous, basically automotive industry are electric vehicles. It's only less than 1% now, but it's going to be, by projection, 5% in 2025. So 5% of $1 trillion is a large amount of money. And then there's a ride-sharing part. Uber, Lyft, Grab, Didi, all these, they are already at $60 billion revenue. So in 2020, it's going to pretty much double. So that's another change that actually driving the automotive industry towards changes. Then there's the ADAS space. So 10 years ago, the only thing I think people are familiar with as far as ADAS capabilities, these are basically, I would call semi-intelligent system that actually helps you in driving. The only thing I think that those kind of things were there, probably, probably something like an alarm saying that while you are basically backing up and you're close to something you're going to hit. But nowadays, if you look at some of these advanced cars, you see features like advanced automatic emergency braking, then automatic cruise control. So Tesla's autopilot is considered a more, basically is automatic cruise control on steroid. So that's kind of, so in the next few years, there are more and more of these systems are going to come into the market, primarily because that actually helps the OEMs or the car makers to get more stars for safety of their car. And some of these actually help a lot in avoiding accidents. So if you consider automatic emergency braking, so if the car actually sees that you're going to hit something and it applies the brake, it's going to be significantly faster than a human being's vehicle. So there are advantages to that, and these things actually are already there in some of the more advanced and luxury cars. The fourth trend that actually is driving is digital cockpit. So more and more of the car, especially high-end cars, nowadays don't actually have this dials and stuff like that. It's mostly LCDs, like the Tesla. If you have seen the inside, it's nothing but LCDs there, everywhere. And most of the controls, nowadays, you would see that there's knobs and stuff like that, but those are actually going to be more like your smartphones, touch sensitive, things like that. So that's another trend that's actually driving the automotive industry towards changes. The fifth one is autonomy, and this one actually has the most amount of hype. And so this one actually doesn't make any money for anybody right now. So the hope is that by 2025 we'll see partial or full autonomy in some areas, and the market probably would be around 36 billion or 6 billion, depending on how you look at autonomy. So so let's get into what is autonomy, because that's the topic of my talk.
Could you distinguish or elaborate again on the autonomy part? Because does that suggest that for full?
Actually, I have a slide later on.
Okay,
to give you
okay.
more ideas.
Thank you.
Again, these are not very concrete terms. Lots of fuzziness in there. So one of the things, if you actually dabble around in the autonomous car industry a little bit, you'll see that people often talk about these 5 levels about automation. This is essentially put out by SAE. They are the primary organization that actually drives some of this autonomous, not autonomous, but the automotive industry. And they came up with this, and right now, for most of us, it is 0, meaning it's everything manual. And then the level 1 is drive assist, where basically you're basically given a warning. So some of these cars with the ADAS capability actually are in level 1 right now. So they'll give you a warning about if you are getting too close to to another car, or you're backing up too far, things like that. So. Second is partial autonomy, and you can keep on going like this. I mean, you can Google it and find all those things on the web. So when people talk about autonomous car, people mostly talk about something between level 3 and level 5. Level 5, as you know, is full autonomy. That essentially means that there is no steering in the car. You basically sit in there and tell it where to go, and it will take you there. So that is debatable when it's going to happen. Waymo thinks that, well, they are going to get there pretty soon. I think in more developed countries, that's probably going to happen, like US or Europe, where the road infrastructure is much more organized and systematic. But if you go to Asia, like China or India, there's a lot of, the infrastructure is not as systematic, so it probably take longer there. So I think the most viable, that's my opinion again, is probably level 4, where you essentially have a dedicated area where you have autonomous cars running, and that's almost like a secure area where pedestrians or other cars are not allowed, or somehow they are basically prevented from actually going in there and interacting with the autonomous cars. So a lot of companies are actually working in this area, level 4. And level 3 is, I think, is probably encompasses the ADAS capabilities. Once you have a very highly intelligent ADAS system, it's probably going to be in the level 3 domain. So level 3 and level 4 are probably going to happen gradually. Level 5, I think, will probably need significant amount of changes. That's my opinion. In the infrastructure also. But well, we can talk about it more if you want. So what is an autonomous vehicle right now? I mean, this is what it looks like. I mean, there are a whole bunch of sensors in there. So some of the sensors you'll probably hear about or have heard about is one of them is LiDAR, which essentially gives you one piece of information that's not available from the other sensor. It's the depth, meaning it'll basically go around and scan your environment and tell you how far something is out there. And that is essentially needed to do a number of things. One is, one is to find out what are the other vehicles around you and what velocities they are traveling in and what directions. Second one is actually gives you the ability to localize yourself, meaning where your car is right now. So that's LiDAR, and that's actually is a very expensive piece of equipment. I think one of the numbers I have seen, the lowest numbers, is about $3,000 a piece. So, and the most well-known vendor in this space is Velodyne, just around the corner here in San Jose. And some of these cars actually use about half a dozen of these LiDARs. So you can imagine the price of all those components going in there. And the second piece, obviously, most important piece are the cameras. So there may be multiple cameras, front-facing, side-facing, back-facing, and you can, as you can imagine, some of these cameras are high resolution, some of these cameras are low resolution. So, and the third, I think, most important sensor are the radars. So the radars actually give you one piece of information that none of the other sensors give you, is the speed of something that's moving. But the radar's resolutions are not that great. So you basically, what autonomous cars do, they basically fuse all this information and kind of make sense of what's happening and where we need to go, things like that. And there are other sensors like ultrasound, GPS, things like that. So that's essentially the whole space of automotive industry plus the autonomous vehicle, which basically seems to have a lot of hype right now. Now, so what would a product manager do in this space? I mean, I do not have any specific list in there, but I'd like to hear what your thoughts are. I mean, what would be the responsibility of a product management and qualification these persons need to have?
Well, it seems like it's the path to profitability is what it's all about. Now, Waymo's going in there with probably $1 million per car of what you said on their cars, and that's they're going to, I don't see them being profitable for a long time. They're just going to buy 20,000 I-Pace cars and integrate that system on there.
Yeah.
And then they're going to bring down the cost of the technology and bring up the space that they're covering. And I'm sure they have a big spreadsheet that tells them that they'll be profitable at that rate at first at $3 a ride and then $2 a ride. And so they'll, and then you've got the completely other strategy, which is the Tesla strategy. It starts off with, we'll just put cheap, every car will have the fully autonomous capability now, and then they will. But that's not costly per car. I mean, they're covering that with the cost to put those cars out, and then they're going to build from the bottom up with Summons, and from the top down with on-ramp to off-ramp autonomy, basically. And they're almost there, I'd say, on-ramp to off-ramp. And that's probably the autonomy that people want right now that own a car.
Yeah.
So the other part of the thing is that the fully autonomous really is only needed for a fleet of hailable taxis, if you will. So there's very, very, very different strategies. One selling to people who are buying cars for themselves, want to own their car. The other is this fleet of cars. And they both, I think they can both see a path to profitability, who gets to profitability quicker and who gets to full autonomous quicker. Because that full autonomous thing, I really think what ought to happen is that the government ought to be involved. And they say we have green roads, and we have cars that have green capabilities, and we have orange roads, orange capabilities, and red roads, red capabilities, you know. So for a red road, you know, we're talking in a city center with bikes and squirrels and dogs and all that. And then you have to have a car that's certified for that. And then the roads ought to all be marked like that. Because, you know, you could have had full autonomy in the 1950s. Just build the highways with a big cable right under there. The car follows the cable and doesn't run into the car in front of it. That's all it has to do.
We had those in San Francisco, anyway.
What?
We had those in San Francisco. The
Cable cars. Yeah. But what I'm saying is, the flaw that we have going on here is the people that build the roads and the infrastructure are not talking to the people that build the cars. We're talking about two different worlds here that they, you know, and that's where I feel that that's what's kind of missing. So you got to also take into account a huge amount, as a product manager, a huge amount of how the infrastructure for charging is going to develop, home charging, and you know, supercharging, kind of street charging or and destination charging. And all that. The only company that's really doing that is Tesla. The rest are kind of saying, well, that's for somebody else to do. Look, there's gas stations. The car companies never built gas stations, so we're not going to build charging stations. Well, that's a huge gamble by Tesla. They're showing the way there with that, you know. But now they are dragging. You ever heard of The Art of War by, what's his name? Anyway, he says, you know, the oblique strategy, that you do stuff that the competitors don't understand, but then in the end, they're following you, you know. And that's really what Tesla's done. Now, I don't know if they're going to be able to win with that strategy. It's really hard to tell. It's a spreadsheet kind of thing, and it involves all this government. So you have to be in. I think the product manager has to be very much forecasting these government actions and being involved in that. You know. The other thing you can do is just have a giant amount of money. Just keep going until it works.
Yeah.
Believe.
Auto industry is an expensive play.
Just thoughts I've had. I don't know.
So I mean, there are that's a very good point. So you have to be familiar with the government regulations and stuff. And probably you actually have to be able to make some of those regulations favorable to autonomous industries, like what Uber did for the car hailing industry. So that certainly is a good point. I mean, I think one of the other things is the perception. I think product management, one of the major job of product manager would be to change the perception of your customer. Meaning autonomous car right now, if you're a consumer, most of the folks who are outside of the valley probably would think, I am not going to let a car drive me. But that kind of perception probably would have to change, and then one of the primary job of product manager would be something like that.
Yeah. You know, at the beginning with elevators, people were scared to death of elevators, you know, and so they even though the elevators could have been completely automated, they had to have a driver in the elevator to make people comfortable with going up and down in the elevator in the park, you know, and it made it easier to build the elevator as well. But you know, that was kind of that could be the Uber thing with somebody. That's kind of what they're doing with the cars too. They drive around with a person in there until people start to get used to it.
I mean, you can see those elevator drivers even now in some of the older buildings in New York City, I guess.
Oh really? Empire State Building maybe or something?
Yeah, Empire State Building certainly. I mean, they don't let you go by yourself. So that's another thing I can think of. The other thing, obviously, you have to know the technology a lot, at what its technology can do. Obviously, these things are probably going to change because we are in a pretty early stage of autonomous cars. So you have to be able to be on your toes on the new technologies. That means you probably have to look out for what technologies are coming up in the market, meaning you have to go out and find what is there. So what is coming up? So one example I'll give is the lidar industry. So I think 5 years ago, there was only one lidar company around, that was Velodyne, pretty much. Now, somebody said that there are about 50 lidar companies, startups coming up. That's good. Basically, I addressed your
What's the cost curve? That's coming down pretty quick, I guess.
So the lowest numbers I have actually have seen. So there's this company called Ulster in San Francisco. They actually publish their prices on their website. So the lowest price I saw was something like $3,000 odd. So Velodyne and there's a company called Quanergy. They're basically claiming that they will have a $200 lidar, but that's probably not going to be the highest resolution one. So most of these cars, they have a lidar that has very high resolution. It essentially has, they call this 64 beam lidar. So that's probably not going to be at $200. That's probably always going to be $1,000.
Of course, that's only one of the 5 or 6 systems you have to have. You probably can't get, you can't get there with just lidar.
Yeah, I mean, the other lidars are not that high resolution, so they're probably less expensive.
Does anybody sell the suite? Is there anybody that sells the suite of all the sensors you need on a car? Here's a package.
Not that I know of, but if you look back in the tier 1 suppliers, these guys are dabbling in all the areas. Bosch is, I'm not sure how many folks have actually heard about Bosch. This is a German company.
Do you have a dealer level in that? I was thinking.
Yeah, there is a dealer level.
The last level? Or what is that?
Yeah, this is the dealer.
No. I mean, you start off with the OEMs, and then you get the suppliers and all this, but then you also, they have to have dealers.
Yeah, I mean.
Except Tesla doesn't have dealers, but all the rest of them have a whole other,
Yeah.
So
So
those dealer contracts, this is another huge strategy area,
That's right, yeah.
Because what's Waymo going to do? They're not going to have those dealers. See, they're getting around the dealers, and Tesla's getting around the dealers, although they're absorbing the cost. Well, so is is Waymo. They're going to have to, I guess they're going to have a huge garage and people and charging facility and these cars. I mean, there's no more like Uber has these independent contractors now. Now they're gone, but you got this. You got to run a big fleet of cars.
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing. I mean, who is going to run that? Who is going to own the fleet of car? Is it going to be
Waymo,
or is it going to be somebody else, or is it going to be car manufacturers themselves? Because
that could be a contract like Pacer, like iPace could say we're gonna contract to take care of all the cars, and you just that's a point. You gotta figure that out too.
An analogy for that would be what happened in the computing industry, right? Right now, I mean, you can go to cloud. You don't have to buy your own servers and stuff anymore. Go to cloud. I mean, this could be something like that. It's car companies would own the cars, and then so to play in this market. So that means the product manager again would have to be aware of all these different balls up in the air, see which one is where.
The big one is with the consumer. How many people, how soon are how many people willing to not own a car and just use this other crappy car that's got some smoker was in there prior and who knows what, and you have to keep those cars really clean and
Yeah, I mean, one of the things you can draw an analogy with is the rental industry, right? The car rental industry. I mean, the more you pay, the better car you get. So if you something like that, I guess.
Uber Black, Uber Pool, Uber this.
Yeah.
There's a lot of angles to this business model,
And as I said, this is in a very early stage, so a lot of things can change. And this is probably the best time to be in here because a lot of things are in the flux, and you can define where things are going to go. And in the process, probably you can make a lot of money yourself, and probably.
Well, I tell you, a lot of people are going to lose a lot of money because everybody and his brother is trying to. I mean, like, look at what happened to Uber. They switched off the NVIDIA and put their own thing on there and killed that bicycle. Apparently.
Yeah, I mean,
apparently that's what happened.
Yeah, I think those two cases, the Uber's case and the Tesla's case, probably would be good to know actually what exactly happened in both cases.
Well, the Tesla one, it looks like it was on autopilot, and the thing had been having trouble with that same point.
Yeah,
when the person
apparently
was
it
driving
goes
it,
in that
But
direction.
they changed the road,
Yeah.
you know, so now what's, you know, it's a government, like if they go out and,
Yeah.
you know, do something screwy in the road, what about vandals that put
Yeah.
fake signs
That's right.
down that the cars read, sabotage, stuff like that, Jesus.
So why it's interesting is that as soon as Uber said that they're going to discontinue their autonomous driving, a few days later, NVIDIA actually said that they're also going to stop all public tests.
Yeah, of all,
So I think there's a connection between the two.
but that sounds like NVIDIA wasn't responsible.
Otherwise, why would they
No.
discontinue there? Right, so,
And then you've got Mobileye versus NVIDIA versus Waymo homegrown and Tesla going homegrown now with Intel chips. I guess they just moved away from NVIDIA.
yeah, Mobileye is another big player in this area, and they obviously have a lot more cloud now because they are part of Intel. As far as I know, they are coming up with a newer version in end of next year that actually will give you almost a LiDAR-like capability. That's what they're claiming. So it remains to be seen. I mean, these are the things a product manager would have to be on top of. So other thing, obviously, I have not talked about is those are the hardware part. But there is also a significant aspect to software part here. Meaning that software technology is not, I don't think the capabilities that Waymo or Uber and all these other players have is actually known that well outside. So if you look at what is available right now is the technology that was the CMU and Stanford folks were using in 2007-8. So in the last 10 years, the amount of development they have done, that's not known at all. Only the folks actually who have worked in those areas know exactly how much progress they have made. And if you listen to the Waymo's claims, I guess that they have made significant progresses since then. So otherwise, they won't be saying all those things. So also, and another thing is for software, especially the open source space, right? So there are some efforts to actually bring an open source stack in the autonomous driving area.
Yeah. Do you think that there'll be just a winner, you know, like Waymo or somebody, and then that'll be it? There'll be a standard, or do you think there'll be many?
So it depends on, it depends on how complex the technology is, really. So if you draw an analogy with the smartphone market, right? So there are basically two players right now. It's Android from Google and Apple. Primarily because it still is a very complex stack. I mean, your UI has to be perfect, your touch thing has to be perfect, you have to integrate so many different things in there. So you can easily build this stack like that. So my guess is probably the autonomous driving stack is not going to be simple. So there are probably one or two players, and the question is, I mean, if you again draw an analogy with the smartphone market, there were larger players in the space like Nokia, right? So Microsoft was a large player before iPhone came out. But none of them were actually able to capitalize on the change. I mean, the same thing is the same thing going to happen to car makers, especially in the autonomous driving area?
Do you think it can be Tesla, Uber, and Waymo with all the rest of the crowd?
Yeah, I mean, so
Uber, they're
So-
going to be gone. And look at their market valuation is enormous, but it seems to me like they're going to be pretty wiped out if they can't get their own automation going.
well, they can always get it from somebody, right? So that's not a big deal. I mean, they still have what 20% of Didi and 17% of Grab. So I mean, if those companies become successful, they make money. So what do they lose? Really, not much. If you look at it from that angle. But if the technology stack is very complex, that means there are not going to be that many players who can actually provide that full end-to-end stack. And Waymo, I mean, being Google, all these car manufacturers are actually afraid of Google, right?
And then there's China. It might come out with
That's there too. I mean, that's another new angle. As a product manager, you have to consider the international competition now. So talking about China, so basically 3 companies in China, right? Tencent, Alibaba, and Baidu. All of them are actually actively doing something in autonomous car industry. So Baidu has recently released an open source stack called Apollo, I think. But I talked to them, and basically they don't think it's anything close to what Waymo has at this point.
How about BYD and Geely and the car companies?
BYD, Geely, I'm not that familiar with BYD, but they were an electric car company,
Yeah.
and I think Berkshire Hathaway has it.
I think they sell more electric cars than
Yeah.
everybody else in the world or something. They sell like
They supply all the taxis, I mean, they're huge.
They're huge. But I also heard that they're actually having problems lately compared to Geely. So.
Also, the buses in China, those things
So
are
they also
electric
make
and they
buses.
can go out. They got 16,000 electric buses, all the electric buses in, I believe, in Shanghai.
Provided by them, yeah, could be. Yeah.
Already, all the buses are electric. That's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, these are all the different things you have to be aware of because your market is not only the US, the market is probably going to be international because if you're only in the US, your competition is international, well, you're already at a disadvantage there. So, you had a question?
Just back to open source. Didn't I hear that Tesla made available a lot of its software technology in the open source community?
I am not aware of that. I'm not aware of that.
Yeah, they did, but I don't think the autonomous driving part.
Yeah, actually.
This is all their original
Yeah.
battery patents and all that sort of stuff because they didn't want to defend them, but they had to have the patent so that somebody else couldn't then patent it and make them pay royalties on their own invention, so to speak. It's like defensive patenting. But they, I think they realized, I don't know, has any of you ever watched these things called American Genius series? It's these things like the Wright brothers versus Curtis. I highly recommend. It's just right on YouTube. You can watch them. There's about 15 episodes. Edison versus Tesla, Smith versus Wesson in the pistols and rifles and whatnot. And all that. But the thing that's amazing is the patents, they get so screwed up. Somebody gets these patents and then they're going to try and license the patents while the other guy runs away with the market. It happened to the Wright brothers. They never made a damn penny on the airplane, even though they patented it and everything. The guy that invented television, he as a 15-year-old, and made it work, completely lost out to RCA, who just kept him in court for 17 years till they ran out his patent, and then they took the whole thing over. So these patents are like a tragedy. To watch that series, it's like tragic. The inventors get screwed over by the powerhouse people that are.
I mean, that's true. I mean, the patents are mostly defensive instruments, right? They are not offensive instruments.
And so I don't know. I think that was that a generous thing, or was that a great strategy, or to help get the whole market going?
So I mean, you would basically do an open source because you know that your competition is doing better than you, and that's your only way out to actually capture market share. That's one reason you do open source.
Now, I don't know this. Do they make every patent going ongoing? They're not. They made a block of patents all available at a certain point in time, but I'm not sure that ongoing that every patent they come out with is automatically open source. I don't know about that.
I mean, that I don't know. I mean, obviously one thing about patent is that it becomes visible to everybody. After a year, once you apply for a patent, it becomes visible to you after 1.5 years, I think. If you don't get the patent, obviously that information is public at this point of time, and then you basically give out your secrets. But yeah, patents are, I think, IP protection is probably going to be, it's mainly meant for deep-pocketed players. I mean, to actually play with IP, you need a lot of money. So that's I think basically should give you an idea about the environment where if you want to play in the automotive industry. So the open source I think is a viable solution, but it's going to take time. So I guess that's about it, all I had. Unless anybody wants to say something.
Can you talk a little bit about what you do in a professional capacity? Is it related to this?
So I'm basically trying to build a startup, and obviously after seeing all this, I'm basically trying to focus on one particular aspect of that whole spectrum, and it's all software. So once you add hardware to that, you need to use a lot of capital. That's kind of my view. I mean, if you look around there, I think in the last 1 year, about half a dozen startups have been funded in this space. I mean, one of the startup I know is very high profile and I have very high regard about. It's called Aurora. So this is the startup that's founded by the person who actually led the CMU team and who actually developed the Waymo product.
Somebody should bring out a game like Monopoly that you play, you know, in your somebody's Tesla. So you know, I mean, the car here, there's a liability, there's a wreck. The government decides not to incentivize.
Yeah.
Yada yada yada. You know, it's a great game.
Yeah, I think it's a complex situation. So there's a lot of opportunities if you find the right one.
And it is totally product management strategy. You know.
Absolutely, yeah. You can build something, but if nobody wants it, then
Thank you.
use it. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. Great question.